An interesting weekend of Rugby World Cup warm-up games, but no unexpected results from the lot. These games are often misleading in the weeks prior to the World Cup because it's not always easy to gauge the real strengths or weaknesses of any teams. Some of them are, however, just glaringly obvious. In the Springboks versus Wales game, it was a one-sided affair as expected, and the Springboks absolutely trampled the poor Wales side. The Springboks were lucky to have two intercept tries, and that penalty try, I don't think that was awarded correctly. Kolisi had an impactful game, and he was in it for the 40 minutes that he was on the field. For Wales, though, there were more questions than answers, and they don't look like they have a lot of depth with these young guys. They played a lot of the younger players, and these players just didn't look up to it. South Africa, however, were running at full steam, and they'll be smiling with a victory like that going into the game with the All Blacks this coming weekend. The 19-point margin that Ireland won by takes a little bit away from the improvement that you've seen from England this past weekend. I think a few things started to fall in place for the English side, but they are not close to where they should be yet. Despite the improvements, ill discipline once again stole all the headlines. It was just another weekend, another red card. They now have two players that both deserve to be banned for a fairly extensive number of games. Hopefully both miss the World Cup just to make an example of how behaviour like this just isn't acceptable. Ireland, on the other hand, they were methodical, clinical in how they got the win. They weren't perfect, but they just kept it taking over and came away with the victory rather easily. Glad that Georgia picked up their win against the US as expected. Uh, Usually the smaller unions just don't have the opportunities to play a lot of warm-up games, so their preparation is always more of a challenge. But this was a good one for Georgia against the US side who wanted to prove that they were actually supposed to be at the World Cup instead of Chile. So happy with the win for Georgia in this game. Italy absolutely crushed Romania. They were dominant throughout, and Romania was never in it. Their 57-7 demolition was lovely to watch, and if anybody said 5 years ago that Italy and exciting rugby would be said in the same sentence, they'd be laughed at. Capuso, however, continues to dazzle with his skill, and he is an amazing fullback. His two tries were just epitomized exactly what this Italy side is all about these days. The France-Fiji game ended up being a wonderful end to the weekend's rugby. France were too good for Fiji, but Fiji were actually in it for most of the game, a little longer than I actually thought they would have been. If Fiji keep up this momentum in terms of growing steadily, they're actually going to be in with a chance of getting out of the group stages with Australia. France, however, in the end just showed their class. Even though the 34-17 scoreline does flatter them a little bit, they deserved the win. Despite the results, I think there were a few teams that were actually winners on the day. The way that England played rather than their ill discipline can be taken as a positive, and they had a decent improvement. Fiji can also be happy with what they did over the weekend despite coming away with the loss. The real winners, however, for the weekend, France, Ireland, South Africa and Italy, and they were very impressive.